about the issue of just health. Have you ever thought about this? If you look at the life expectancy of people from different parts of the world, the difference in how long people will live and what it is that contributes towards some people, for example, in Sweden, being able to live to almost 80 years of age, and other people in Swaziland or Lesotho, for example, barely making it through their 30s. What is the issue that allows people to be able to flourish, to live a full life and to experience so much? And what is it that robs them of the capacity of doing so? So today's vlog is entitled Empire, Economics and Apathy. And the title comes from a paper that I wrote some years ago, in fact, which eventually was published in a book called Suffering in a Global Age. How's that for a catchy title for a book? I'll put a description and a link in the show notes below, which was called Empire, Economics and Apathy. And I used this concept again in this most recent paper in response to an article written by Professor Jean-Pierre Wills from Radboud University in Holland. And he's a biomedical ethicist, so he's a theologian who thinks about the issues of ethics related to biology and medicine. So it could be things like, for example, stem cell research or artificial insemination are some of the ones that are known. But it also relates to things like health and healthcare. And the interesting point that he makes in his paper is that he says that particularly in general sort of philosophical ethics, there's been an obsession with the issue of just health care. What does it mean to be able to provide the kind of health care that allows people to thrive? So when a person is ill, that they get access to the kind of treatment which is available that will allow them not only to survive but to recover and even to thrive where there is disease. And we know clearly that one of the issues in countries where the life expectancy is so low, just do yourself a favor, go and have a look on Wolfram Alpha and search for life expectancy in Swaziland, or do the same, for example, for England or for America, and you'll see this disparity. And we know that one of the issues there is access to health care. So access to the kind of treatment that allows one to survive, for example, cancer, or that allows one to live longer if you have a terminal disease like HIV or AIDS. Now, when I wrote my chapter years ago, Empire, Economics and Apathy, it was at the height of the Mbeki administration. Thabo Mbeki was the president of South Africa, and his denial of HIV, AIDS as being linked. Thabo Mbeki had this crazy crackpot idea that HIV, the human immune deficiency virus, and AIDS, which is what people die of, were not linked. Now, there is an element of what he said which is sensible. The point that he made was to say that it's not HIV that causes people to die, but poverty and the fact that people don't have adequate nutrition, that they're dying of other things like tuberculosis, etc. Now that's true to a measure, but of course we have since come to learn absolutely unequivocally, in fact it was known at the time, that HIV and AIDS are directly linked. And the point that I made was that because of his desire for empire, because he had a political ideology that was driving the way in which he saw this disease and how we treat this disease, hundreds of thousands of people suffered and lost their lives. Now, of course, we would say absolutely clearly that that is unjust. Any political system that robs people of their lives is unjust. I mean, people like that should be charged with crimes in the international court, crimes against humanity. And I know certainly at one stage there was a group that was trying to charge him. And Thabo Mbeki's political ideology stopped him from admitting that HIV and AIDS were related, and the consequence of that was that he refused to roll out antiretrovirals. So civil society and faith-based organizations got together and said the only just thing to do is to force the state to provide this kind of care, antiretrovirals, but basic health care for all of South African citizens. When it came to the point of implementing this, the Minister of Finance at the time, Trevor Manuel, I have a quote in my book and in the chapter that I wrote, said that one of the reasons why they chose not to do this was because it made no economic sense. So we see the second element in the equation coming in. Rather than living for what is just, they began to say, well, the reason we don't want to provide antiretrovirals is because all that will do is prolong the life of sick people who are infected with this disease, and instead of curing them or giving a solution, it would just place an additional burden on an already burdened state apparatus that provides healthcare. So the basic logic, the reasoning behind that was to say it's actually cheaper for the state to let people die. Now, as a Christian, as a theologian, as an ethicist, there's absolutely no way that that could ever be justified. It is fundamentally unjust. Now, that was the first two elements, empire, economics, and the third one was apathy. It was very interesting for me to see how the churches responded to this. You see, one of the problems that we have theologically when it comes to ethics is that sometimes our bad theology leads to a bad ethics. And because HIV/AIDS, certainly in the early 1980s, was spread primarily through behavior which didn't occupy the center of the moral norm of society, so homosexual male sexual intercourse and through drug use, the using of dirty needles, Christians made the mistake of thinking that this disease somehow was a punishment for behavior that was not acceptable. Now, let me just say, if you read any studies on the way in which in the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, we understand the relationship between sin and disease, you'll see that that kind of theology is fundamentally flawed. It's not an acceptable theology. The next step in the church's response was to say, well, we recognize that there are some innocents. That in itself is a problematic category, as if some people are innocent when they get ill and others are not. But the kind of innocents they spoke about were doctors who contracted the disease through a needle stick injury, or children who were infected by their HIV positive mother at birth or through breastfeeding. And so they began to realize that there were innocents, and so the kind of care that was necessary, preventative care, identifying care, and post-identification care, that this kind of care was something that the church needed to be engaged in. But it was seen as a ministry to the other, almost as if the church was without HIV and these other people needed some form of care. And that kind of othering, that lack of solidarity, that lack of empathy with a person who is suffering never allows for effective ministry and care. It was only much later, the first church that I know of who did this was the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, who began to recognize that the disease itself affects our theology, our understanding of how we should engage it. Now think about it, HIV is very, very different to cancer, for example. If you have cancer in your finger, you can have surgery to have that finger removed and the rest of the body is untouched. But HIV is a very different disease. If one cell in your body is infected, the whole of your body becomes HIV positive. And so the Methodist Church adopted this notion from, of course, Paul's writings. If one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. This notion of deep solidarity, the fact that it's not that other people are HIV positive, but we are HIV positive. And so the church began to encourage its ministers, I was among that group, to have themselves tested, to know their status, and also began to recognize that our members are HIV positive. So it was a very interesting thing that it took the church so long to respond. And the thing that strikes me about this in terms of the notion of just health, not just health care, but what does it mean to provide a system in society where every person in your community, every child in the school where your children go to school, where every person in the company that you work for, where every member of your congregation has the same possibility to flourish in life, to avoid the kinds of diseases that people can avoid today, like HIV infection or high cholesterol or blood ailments or heart conditions, where people have a sufficient diet to be able to deal with them. What does it mean to have a just health system or a just health approach in society? Because it's more than just the provision of just health care. So I want to invite you to think a little bit about this. What is there that you could do? Now, obviously, some of it is advocacy. Your church could advocate for a clinic to be established. You could make your buildings available so that people could be tested. Obviously, you could offer care. I know of many churches in South Africa who provide meals for people at HIV clinics so that they can take their antiretrovirals. But of course, the other thing is, as salt and light in the world, we can begin to change the ways in which medical schemes work. We can begin to change the ways in which the political parties that we vote into power distribute access to medical services. Why is it that some have too much when others don't even have enough to survive? So remember, today's not a lecture, it's just a thought. I'll put a link in the description below to my paper, Empire, Economics and Apathy, and maybe you can read on it. And I'd love to hear your ideas, your views. What is there that you could do that could change this situation? That as a Christian, a person who thinks theologically, who thinks about the world in the way in which God would think about it, what is there that you could do to provide a more just environment in which everybody has the possibility to thrive and be happy? Well, thanks for listening today. This vlog was recorded, by the way, driving between two meetings on my way to the university now. I have some meetings this afternoon and I'm seeing some of my graduate students in a little while. But it's an absolutely beautiful day again today. And yeah, I hope the scenery around me was interesting for you to see. Maybe go back and take a little look if you missed 1 or 2 points. But thanks for watching, and I hope you subscribe, like the blog, and I'd love to see you again. Have a blessed day.